All right, so thanks so much everyone for joining us this afternoon for our brief introduction to our updated AI literacy module. I'm Emily Rush. I'm an instructional designer with Citi, and I know some of you, and thanks so much for joining us. Due to the time frame of today's workshop, it will be primarily didactic, but I hope at any point you will feel free to ask questions or ask questions in the chat. Looks like we have a few Citi members who can certainly ask questions or direct my attention to questions if you have something that you'd like to know more about. Our plan for this next half hour is to, first of all, we're going to talk about what is generative AI, not in the technical sense, but more in the sense of why does it matter in terms of having specific education or guidance about generative AI. Then we're going to talk about why AI literacy matters. After that, we're going to move on to what is AI literacy in particular. I'll give you a brief overview of the module and talk about some of the many ways that you can use the module in your class. All right, so in terms of thinking about AI, I really like this description from Ethan Mollick, who is a leading voice in terms of AI and especially generative AI. And I think this helps answer the question, why do we need a module for generative AI? Why might you want this into your class? And so Mollick describes generative AI as a general purpose technology. And in terms of its impact, he says that we might think of it as comparable to steam power, electricity, or the internet. So pretty major technologies. McKinsey, for example, talks about these in AI being akin to these technologies and maybe something that's like a fourth industrial revolution. And as we're seeing that even though this wasn't necessarily intended, and in many cases it might not be desirable, that AI is transforming work and the way we do things across a variety of industries. And it does this because large language models like ChatGPT or Claude can imitate and emulate lots of aspects of human thinking, like generating text, thinking about arguments, and being creative. It's also one of the most rapidly adopted technologies to date. Okay? So its impact is quite vast. As educators and people in a higher education setting, what we're dealing with is this, what I would call an inadvertent educational disruption. And this module is a lot, and in many ways, it's about how do we cope with and adapt to this inadvertent educational disruption, right? So although naturally it might make sense to start with talking about what AI literacy is, I'd like to focus on why AI literacy matters before getting to the definition. And I'm going to do this first by talking about some of the current AI capabilities in terms of the technology, and then I'm going to talk about social and cultural factors surrounding its use. And so the first thing that I want to remind everyone is that AI and generative AI is increasingly ubiquitous, is built into a variety of almost all sorts of kinds of platforms. So now anyone can click on Google Gemini, and that's what you see on the left, and you can immediately select a button that says help you write. And with a prompt, you can write almost anything. On the right is a little screenshot from Copilot. So again, you can very easily ask Copilot to write in a variety of formats, genres, styles, again, at the click of a few buttons. In addition to the ubiquitousness of AI tools embedded in many of our basic writing platforms, we also have the proliferation of these so-called humanizer tools. And these are tools that their explicit purpose is to make AI-generated text seem more human-like. And if you Google it, there are dozens and dozens of them. Laura and I spoke about this at a previous workshop. There's also very specific, task-specific AI tools like this discussion board response generator that can, in fact, generate really good discussion responses. And I'm going to ask you not to panic. I know this is a lot to take in, so I'm not trying to be overwhelming. I just want you to know how much AI is sort of overflowing into the educational landscape. In addition to all those other capabilities, it's very easy for a savvy user of AI to customize ChatGPT, for example, to write in a specific style, to adopt a voice or persona, to use certain words or avoid certain words. And you can actually very easily train the AI to emulate your writing style by feeding in samples of your previous work. loading. And we don't need to watch the full video, but basically this is a technology in which AI also allows you to take a static image. So just a photograph, combine it with a vocal source, and it will produce video output. So AI's capabilities extend way beyond just text production. And the other thing I want to mention in terms of this ideas about technology surrounding AI use is AI detection. Especially after this past weekend, a lot of educators I know saw this article from the Wall Street Journal with a great deal of hope. And the article claimed that OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT, has an AI detection tool. They just haven't released it for 2 years, but it's there. A leading expert in AI, he's the chief AI officer from Western University, and actually the first chief AI officer at any university, has written a great response. And I'll make sure I send this out after the workshop. But he talks about the reasons that we don't want to put our hopes into this kind of technology. And he says, for example, that AI detection cannot work with the level of certainty that most companies claim, that they work in a certain way by adding invisible digital signatures to their product, not actually by detecting text and something around here. And when they use a kind of tool, it actually undermines their product, and it only works with their product. So if students become aware or users become aware that ChatGPT has detection features, they can just use a different product. What I think is beneficial about Daly's article is that he says instead of focusing on detection, we need to think about not just the technological issues, but rather the ethical concerns. And I love this quote from Daly. He says that we need to start thinking about the hard questions. So asking why students are cheating, how we can think about different kinds of assessments, and how do we foster a culture of learning? See a lot of questions or things in the comment. Okay, and it looks like Laura's responding to this. All right. Now I'd like to talk about some other of the maybe social and cultural concerns or risks of ignoring AI in education. And the first thing is, well, like looking back a slide, so we just talked about how we really can't outrun or outregulate the technology. But there are also a lot of social and cultural factors surrounding the technology's use. And some of these are anecdotal, but I don't think that we should discount them. So there's been a lot of evidence that students are really apprehensive about AI. And there are others who are apprehensive, but they're using it. They're just not telling anyone they're using it, which is, of course, problematic. Another issue that Mark Watkins talks about is that there are students who are at risk of being misled by online influencers who promote AI use for educational shortcuts. And I'm not going to show us all these TikToks, but you can look at them if you want when I send out the slide deck later. But these are a series of TikTok stills that I collected that are all young influencers promoting the use of AI, often for learning shortcuts. And I know that many of your learners might not necessarily be young or college age, but I believe that evidence has shown that Gen Zs and millennials are very influenced by things like TikTok more so than mainstream media. So I think the point here is not that you should distrust your students, because that's never what we would want to suggest. I think the point is that we want to use AI literacy to be part of this conversation. So they're not just having a one-sided conversation and just hearing from influencers, that they're hearing more from their faculty than just, this is our AI policy. Other social and cultural factors that we might think about, and this is data from a July study released by Cengage, is that many students feel that they're unprepared in terms of the use of AI. So they wish that AI had been part of their academic training, and they don't feel prepared to use AI in the workforce. Another factor still, and this is completely understandable, that faculty might also feel unprepared or overwhelmed about the pace of this technology. And I know you're all extraordinarily busy. I think that makes sense. If you're looking for guidance, there's Mark Watkins has a beautifully written article about, instead of feeling overwhelmed by this, or what he calls imposter syndrome, that instead, as faculty, you lean into those feelings. And of course, remember that you have significant domain expertise and critical thinking that you can bring to these discussions. So in the sense, you don't need to be experts in AI to have conversations about AI with your students. Okay, so that was sort of the promo or the hype to why you might want the AI literacy module. And so what I'd like to do now is talk about the AI literacy module as a trusted resource. And I'm not saying that you should bow to peer pressure by any means, but I will say that the AI literacy module has a demonstrated impact and demand, both within the university and externally. So last year when we created a version, we shared it within the university and also with a number of institutions. So last year it was requested by 424 institutions for use by 370,000 students, and that is self-reported data. And it was requested by a wide range of institutions, very prestigious institutions that you are familiar with, and as well as the Department of Defense also wanted to explore it for employee training. So it got a lot of traction, which is pretty exciting. And we just released publicly the most recent version, and already in the last week, it's been requested by 345 institutions. So it has been received very favorably by members of the higher education community. Okay. Now, that was a whole lot of the why you might want AI literacy. I want to pause for a minute and just make sure there's no questions from the chat or questions from our participants. I'm going to take that as a no, but certainly feel free to ask a question if something comes up. So now I'd like to talk about what is AI literacy. And there are a variety of definitions that people use. What the definition that we've settled on is this idea of AI literacy and thinking it as a broad set of competencies or skills for navigating an AI-driven world. And it encompasses not just knowing how to use AI, but most importantly, knowing when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. And within this, we've come up with 4 AI competencies. The first one being recognition. So really just getting a sense of how pervasive AI is in our everyday life. And sometimes it's easy to forget how much AI is part of our everyday lives. The next competency is comprehension. So thinking about how AI works on at least a foundational level understanding about AI, statistical patterning, sort of a rudimentary understanding of how AI systems work and what are the limitations of these kinds of technologies. The third element is critical thinking. So thinking about AI outputs and how do we critically evaluate them for accuracy, bias, and ethical implications. And then the last competency is thinking about what does it mean to be proficient in terms of AI use. All right, and that since last year, we did get feedback and we've heard both positive feedback and also some concerns about the nature of the module, and we appreciate both kinds of feedback. And so as such, we decided to sort of restructure the competencies. So this year, the foundational competency is recognition, followed by comprehension, critical thinking. And so that proficiency is really that top level competency to emphasize that in order to be an effective and ethical user of AI, that you have to have critical thinking. Now, I know there's been a lot of concern about the idea that if I put this module in my class, am I saying that it's okay to use AI, or am I advocating for the use of AI? And that's a legitimate concern, but I would argue that the real emphasis of the module is about adapting to an AI world, and that doesn't mean adopting AI. Those are two very different things. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean with that. All right, so throughout the module, in many places, we put a great deal of emphasis on the limitations of AI, especially in the student-facing content. And so I think this is a great quote. Moloch's use of the word tedious, it really emphasizes the fact that there is no shortcut to becoming an expert. AI doesn't change anything at this point about what it means to be an expert, that you still have to undergo hard work and rigorous training, careful skills and practice to become an expert. But that's the beginning of the student-facing content. The end of the student-facing content is a personal accountability checklist that students, there's also a downloadable version, so students can download this and keep this handy when they're doing their work. And this is just a reminder of what students need to consider when they're contemplating using AI including factors that might be like not understanding the assignment, thinking about, is this really what is this idea about using AI about? Do I really just need to get help from a tutor or ask for instruction from my professor, or something like that? And in between this kind of book that I've shown you, there's 6 other sections that talk about the additional risks of AI. So there's sections about privacy, intellectual property, misinformation and disinformation, the significance for the potential for biased output or other ethical concerns, and the dangers of over-reliance. So that's sort of the key message for students. As faculty, I think what we want you to be aware of is that the module is designed as a resource for you, and it's supposed to be a very flexible resource. This is highlighted with the definition that we use from Poly. So there's no one right way to have AI literacy in your class. It's whatever works for you. That said, I do want to suggest that it's probably not the best idea to ignore AI, but however you do AI literacy education, that's the right way. Other things about the module that promote flexible use are, well, this is sort of our suggestions for how you could use the module. So if you download the module, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, we suggest that you read or listen to, there's an audio option, so you can do either one and look at the instructor page and keep that unpublished, that you publish the student-facing pages, and you can customize those as needed. It's a CC license resource, so you can do whatever you want as long as you keep the license. There's also a sample announcement template, so if you want to communicate to your students the fact that you're using that module in your class, you might use that template. You might also have a Q&A discussion forum to promote sort of ongoing conversation about AI and AI ethics or literacy or whatever you would like to in your course. We've also developed a series of AI ethics discussion questions that you might use or customize for your domain or for your discipline. And if you're interested in actually trying out AI with your students, we also have a sample class activity. All right, so well, hopefully this was better than last time I tried this. I'd like to show you how to access the module, and you can do that by going to Canvas Commons. The easiest way to find Commons is to log into Canvas and look at the global navigation menu, which is the far left menu, and you'll see that there's a button for Canvas Commons, and you would probably have to search in the search bar for Introduction to AI Literacy. You want to go to the 2024 version, and you can do a couple of things. You can look at in Commons. Some reason it's just not as visually appealing in Commons. It sort of changes the formatting a little bit, but if you're not sure about it, this is a great place to get started. If you want to save it so you can find it more easily, you can add it to favorites, and that worked today, so that's good. Let me copy the link to this and we'll see if it will work for you all. Hopefully that link will work. And the other thing, if you want to add it to a course site, or if you have a little bit of reservation, which is perfectly fine, you could add it to a dev site or a sandbox. And all you need to do that is you've navigated to this point, you will select import or download, and then let me find a site where I want to put it. I'm going to put it in my sandbox site. So I will tick that box and scroll down to import in course. And fortunately, it worked for me today. So it made it look easy, since it is, which is great. It's as easy as that. And wow, I have a few minutes to spare. So I'm happy to take questions if anyone has questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I am gearing up to incorporate AI directly into my online lectures as like pre-work for class. And I found we use APA 7 in occupational therapy, and I found a nice APA 7 resource on how to reference AI. So I'm planning to use that. But then one thing that I was wondering is, how do I adapt my rubrics to make sure that I'm accounting for all the nuances that AI brings? So like, well, an easy one is I'm going to add in, you must ensure that it's referenced appropriately. But I'm wondering, do you have any resources or tips on what else to include as essentials in a rubric if we are embracing AI for written assignments? Because that's what I'm looking for now.
I do, yeah. Let me look for that resource. But last summer we created a guide to what we call human AI collaborative writing, which is what some people just call writing with AI.
Okay.
It's sort of, I guess, the trendy way to talk about that. And so it's a very detailed resource and it has a sample rubric. So let me see if I can find that. I'll put it in the chat and then I can also show it on screen. And I've also seen some other rubrics that people have used. So I can look for that if this guide isn't exactly what you need. Let me see if I can drag it over to the other screen.
Oh, this looks really good.
Oh, thanks.
Not that I would expect anything less.
Yeah, this is a detailed resource about what is human AI collaborative writing, which maybe it sounds pretentious, but we're going with that term for now. It talks about different kinds of writing and different tools, why this might matter in higher ed. It does address AI detection. I'll have to see if that's out of date, but we haven't changed our position on AI detection. It has guidance on redesigning assignments and things that you might do to prepare your students. I'm going to keep scrolling because this is a super long document. There is a sample assignment that we made up and then a sample rubric that you might use for thinking about how to grade students. The other thing I'm thinking, if you're planning on using AI, it's a different suggestion, but I really like it. There's an educator, his name is Mike Kentz, and I'll put his name in the chat and I can try and follow up. He has instead of just evaluating the output, the final product, he suggests looking at students' prompts. Because depending on how you prompt, that's really where you see the thought process. So I think that's another innovative approach to integrating AI into your class.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, because one of the things, what I'm going to be having them do is use AI as a starting point for developing a proposal for a community partner for program development. And one of the things that I want them to submit to me as part of every online class is their prompts and then their outputs as part of a homework deliverable. And I agree. I think that's where the bulk of metacognition is going to come through anyways, is more in terms of how are they conversing with the robot.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be in touch because Bronco promised to hold my hand throughout the process.
Okay, great.
You'll be hearing from me.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. I had an idea and it already left my brain. So if I think of my other idea, I'll reach out to you directly.
Yes. Yeah, let's stay in touch.
Okay. Any other questions about the AI literacy module? While you're thinking about if you have any questions, I'm going to ask you to please take a moment just to let us know how you thought the workshop went and give a little feedback. You can use the QR code or I put the link to that in the chat. I'm happy to stay after for a few minutes and answer any questions if you want to talk about AI literacy or AI more broadly. And I'm just going to thank everyone for joining us today. I think I will stop sharing and stop the recording.